morning!
T and Andy here, and today we're doing another gear review.
So what's really the difference between a $30 tent and a $300 tent? Well, come with us and find out. Hey, did you subscribe yet? It's down here. If you like our content, make sure you go subscribe and give us a big thumbs up. And leave any comments down below. If we missed something or if there's a better tent, let us know. Alright, let's start us off and introduce the tents that we are going to be comparing. I have a Walmart tent. It's by Ozark Trail. It's a 3-person tent and it's $35 bucks.
Very cheap.
Tia?
In comparison, I've got a Marmot tent here. This is the tungsten 2-person tent, as you can see there. And this one it retails for $300 USD. So in Canadian, it's actually a little bit more than 300. To start off our review, we're going to take a look at the weight of each tent. The Ozark Trail Tent weighs about 2,200 grams, or approximately 5 or so pounds. It is quite a bit heavier than the Marmot. The Marmot comes in around 1,200 grams, so 1,000 grams lighter, or about 3 pounds total. There's quite a significant difference between each of the options. The Ozark Trail Tent comes with the tent, rainfly, poles, stakes, gear pocket, and of course a bag to pack it all into. Similarly, the Marmot comes with a tent, rainfly, pole, stakes, and a carrying bag to stuff it all in.
So here we are, we have the inner tent set up. We don't have the rainfly on it yet, but I did want to take a moment to pause here and talk to you guys a little bit about the setting up of the tent. It's pretty simple construction. It's two poles that go from side to side, but because this is a cheaper tent, it does show. As you can see, when I was setting it up, I was having a little bit of a difficulty getting the poles to stay inside these skewer thingies that they have to go into. A little bit of a spoiler, this is not as much of a problem in some of the better tents or the more expensive tents where they actually have these locking mechanisms. So that's one downside. But if you have 2 people setting this thing up, it's actually very straightforward. Clipping the tent in is also really easy. Everything about it was a pretty easy setup, except for getting the poles into the skewer. Another difference between this tent and some of the more expensive tents is that you do need to put the pole through the sleeves at the top of the tent. That made the whole entire putting together process just a little bit more difficult because instead of using these clips like you see on the side for the whole entire thing, you do have to kind of maneuver the skewers into their individual sleeves correctly and then put things together. One of the great things about this particular tent is actually what they call the bathtub, or this material on the bottom. The tarp is a pretty thick material, so you don't really even need to bring an extra tarp, which will save some weight for you. Another thing that is great is this little envelope on the side. It actually opens up, allowing you to put a extension cord through in case you're on a campground where electricity is provided.
All right,
here's the tent fully set up with the rainfly, and it's time to take a look at some of the features inside the tent. We just demonstrated one of them. It actually has 2 layers on these tent walls, meaning it provides great amount of ventilation, and the way that the tent zippers, it actually allows you to tuck this in so that it's not hanging around. This tent only has 1 door in a zipper that goes all the way around. Now, I made that look really easy, but in reality, these rain covering flaps are on different sides. It makes closing and opening them kind of annoying sometimes, but not a deal breaker for a $30 tent. The door can be clipped and fastened to the side if you wanted to stay open with this handy dandy little plastic piece. And inside of the tent is actually quite spacious. You can easily fit 2 adults in this tent with some bags on either end. I'm about 6 feet tall, and neither my head nor my feet touch either side of the tent. And last but not least, a great amount of headspace inside this tent for you to sit up and play some cards or something like that. Come on inside. This is what it looks like inside the tent. The one other feature inside this tent is this little mesh baggie. It's just a convenient place for you to put your phone or a charger or something like that. And that's about it for the $30 tent. What do you think, Tia?
Not too shabby.
Whoa, there's actually a little bit of an echo.
All right, behind me we've got the $300 Marmot tent. And you probably saw this one was a little bit easier to set up. So the very first pro that I want to point out is the little loopholes that they have for the pegs to go in. This makes it super easy for one person to set up, because once you put the pole in that loophole, it's kind of locked in there almost. You'd have to really pull it for it to come back out. Now, another difference you'll probably notice is that the Marmot tent is mostly made of very lightweight mesh. And this is what really differentiates an expensive backpacker tent from an everyday Walmart tent. Instead of having a combination of the thicker tarp material and mesh, almost the whole tent is going to be a lightweight mesh. The only portion of this tent that is not mesh is what Andy pointed out as the bathtub. And obviously the reasoning that we don't want mesh down here is because we don't want moisture or water to seep in if it's raining while you're camping. Now, I want to talk about the poles a little bit too. The poles on this Marmot are made a little bit differently than that of the Ozark tent. And again, this contributes to its light weight. The quality is also a lot better. We never thought that the quality of poles would be something that we would talk about on a tent, but after using this one, these poles are very sturdy and very well built. You also may have noticed that as soon as I took the poles out of their bag, it's almost like they magnetically snapped into place. It wasn't really a struggle of trying to get them in there. They kind of just go snap, 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 and then they're all in place. Lastly, this tent doesn't require us to put the poles through any loopholes or big pieces of material. You literally just attach each 4 corners to their loopholes on the bottom, and you take the snaps and attach them to each of the poles. The last part of the poles that I want to talk about is you may have noticed that there was one small pole that came in as part of this tent as well. And that's actually used to hold open each of the doors on this tent. That's right, you heard me correctly, each of the doors. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, if we're talking about material specifically, the tent itself is made of nylon, which is very lightweight, and the poles are made of titanium, which is what allows them to be lightweight as well. Now I want to talk a little bit about the inside before we put the rainfly on, because this is meant to be more of a compact tent and it might be a little bit dark inside once we put that rainfly on. So as I mentioned, this tent has entrances from both sides, this side and that side. This makes it super easy to manage 2 people in this tent. If we had to try and squish both in from one side, it would probably be a little bit of a struggle. Now, I do want to point out this is a 2-person versus a 3-person, so it is going to be a little more compact, but again, if you're backpacking, that's something that you want to look forward to. So, to open this up, it's got zippers all the way from the bottom, and they come all the way up to the top, and you can easily get in and out of the tent. Now, the tent itself is long enough for 2 adults to lay from top to bottom. That's right. You may have noticed it's definitely a little bit smaller. One thing that we can't do inside of this tent is put our gear. So you're probably wondering, what are you gonna do if you have bags or gear that you need to bring in the tent with you? Well, we're gonna show you. All right, you watched me set up that rainfly all by myself. I didn't need Andy's help versus the Ozark tent, which did require both of us because it kind of flew everywhere. Now, before I actually stake this back into the ground, there's a couple of features that I want to talk about. So, although the tent has this pole here, Marmot actually thought about something really ingenious, which was how are we going to actually strap this down in a way where the vestibule leaves enough space for you to get in and out. So if you actually fold up the rainfly, you'll notice this right here. And this clips right on to that pole so that your vestibule also sits further out from the door. This is really handy for getting in and out of the tent. It also wicks the rain away from falling in your tent. Very smart design. Now, once you've attached those, super simple. You've got hooks on each of these corners that look like this. And these just hook all the way down onto your ropes down here. And then you just tighten it however tight you need it to be. So we're gonna do that on both of the corners on this side. So once you have all of your corners hooked down, you're actually going to pull the vestibule out and stake it to the ground. The stakes here have little notches on them that you attach the string into. You can see it just loops in like that to make sure it's securely in there. And you just stick it directly into the ground. So you'll recall earlier when I said the one downside of the Marmot is that there's no space inside of the tent to put any of your bags or your gear. But that is resolved because there's a vestibule on each side, so each door has its own space down here. So if you're backpacking or bike packing, or if you have a bag when you're going camping that you want to keep with you, you simply just put them in the vestibule portion of the tent.
So one side does have a larger vestibule than the other, as we came to realize, which is not a big deal. There's still more than enough space to fit a lot of gear in them. Now the way these work is there's actually a little bit of Velcro down here. So you open up the Velcro and then you can zip the vestibule right open. This now gives you access to your door into the tent. These vestibule doors also roll and can be opened and kept open to have airflow within the tent. The last piece of ventilation that I want to talk about here is actually on the outside at the very back of the tent here. You'll see there's some Velcro pieces, and if I open this up, there's actually kind of this stiff little pole here. And if you just take the pole and Velcro it like that, you're going to get another area of airflow in and out of the tent. So that's what makes this breathable, because unlike the Ozark, you don't have the option of half mesh, half tent, right? You've got all mesh on your tent and a full covered rainfly. So these ventilation pieces are going to let the tent breathe. One last piece about this little flap here is if you do go camping in the colder months, having this open prevents condensation from occurring. So another really handy thing right here.
All right, Tia. So we're obviously gonna keep that one, right? It's only $30.
Only $30, can't go wrong.
Which one should you choose? Well, let's start with the Ozark. It is only $30, so perfect for people who are just getting into camping. However, that tent just doesn't fold up as nicely. When you are very concerned about weight or even how much volume in terms of space your tent takes, that's a big consideration that the Ozark just doesn't match up.
But if you're just going everyday kind of camping at a provincial park or a national park, this tent works absolutely perfectly. We've used it in one of our trips at one of the provincial parks here in Ontario, and it met our needs for what we needed for park camping.
Yeah, it was actually really nice for days where it's super humid. When we were in the Marmot on the day where it was humid, Tia thought she was gonna die.
It was very warm in there.
Very hot. But in this tent, we opened up the little mesh part and a nice breeze just came in and it made the whole night very pleasant.
Now, if we take a look at the Marmot, it definitely is a little bit higher in quality, and overall the weight of it is not something that you can beat. So if you're looking for a tent for backpacking or bikepacking, something where you need to keep your gear condensed and light, the Marmot is hands down the way to go.
Now, I want to address something before we move on from the weight. The Marmot is a 2-person tent and the Ozark is a 3-person tent. So that obviously makes a little bit of a difference, but the Marmot is still way lighter in comparison.
Now, looking overall at the ease of setting it up, the Marmot works really well if you're one person.
That's a winner for sure.
I was able to set that up without any help, no problem. The Ozark definitely is a little more difficult because the pegs that you put the poles into tend to not stay in when you're doing the opposite side of the tent.
That really is kind of the differentiator. The make of the poles and the way you insert it so that it pops up, the Marmot just wins.
I will say overall that when we first looked at tents and we saw tents for $300, $400, $500, I thought that was completely absurd. Why would you need a tent that expensive? But after using the Marmot and the Ozark, you do see a difference in quality, and it really does just come down to what you're looking for out of your tent. Now, the last thing that we wanted to show you is if these tents are waterproof, and this works out perfectly because it's now raining.
So let's go take a look. So how do you really choose a tent? Well, along the way as you watch this video, if you ever went like, why would I need something like that? That's a good indication you don't need that tent. So really, these tents are both great for whatever application you're using them for.
Yep, I think that pretty much sums it up. We'll probably keep both of them. I think one that we'll use when we just go like random spontaneous local camping trips, and the Marmot we'll keep for when we go bike packing. If you haven't seen our videos on our very first bike tour ever, check them out up here, and we'll keep that for anything that we need lightweight camping for.
Yeah, okay, so it's raining. Let's get out of the rain.
All right, let's go.